Hello, everybody. Welcome back to HR. Let me have a mint. And okay, so today we are talking about our fourth subject. Now, I had asked you in the textbook to read, I don't know if you can see this. It's very, very sunny where I am. Yes, you should be able to see this. This was chapter 3 of the American Management Association's chapter by chapter book. So this one, if you noticed, wasn't really about strategic HR. I told you for that to take a look at the Dessler textbook. This one that I asked you to read last time is really concerned with what we're doing today, which is talking about the real first part of the core of this class. What we've done so far, which was an introduction to HR, followed by the laws and the regulations and rules. Oh, I'm going to get a keyboard protector. Okay, so our first week we did was the introduction to HR, the second week was the laws and regulations, and the third week was strategy and how HR fits in with this strategic idea in a business. So now that we've done those three subjects, we can get into the core of this class, which is HR, recruiting, selection, training, compensation, and performance management, those 5 elements. Once we've done those 5, then we'll cover the other 3, labor relations, ethics and fairness, and health and safety. So let's jump right in and start talking about this idea of recruitment. So if you've noticed in my PPTs, or maybe you haven't yet, or in the book, there's actually 2 parts to chapter 4. There's this part of job analysis and talent management, and then in the Dessler textbook, he separates it into another part, which he calls workforce planning and recruiting. To me, these go together. To me, they're both chapter 4, but I do separate it. So we're going to have 2 separate lectures, 2 separate PPTs. I'm not sure we'll get through it all in 1 week, but that's fine. We have plenty of time. So what we're talking about now is recruiting. So what do I mean by recruiting? Well, I mean, if you want to have a business or you're a manager of a business, you need to have employees. And before you can select the employees, you have to get people who want the job, and that's recruiting. Recruiting is the art of getting a group of people who want the job. It's a very specific skill. It's very different than choosing people. It's certainly different than training people. It's much more related these days to the internet. In the past, it would have been closer to advertising or marketing. It's much closer to those than it is to management, because you're not really managing anybody yet. You're trying to get people to come. Now, you might be in charge of recruiting at a large company, and then you're an HR manager, and you're working with other people, and you're helping guide them to write a good advertisement, which we'll talk about. And where do you post the advertisement? We'll talk about that. You know, it's so easy to say, oh, you just write an advertisement and put it on the internet. And that's the problem, is a lot of people think that that's what it is. You know, I'm reminded of, you guys know my background is mostly theater in China. And so one of the last positions I had before I came back to America is I was helping the company Alibaba. So you all know the company Alibaba. They wanted to make a theater group, and they ended up just buying one, but they wanted to make one. And the name of the group was 42, Susher. And so they had me come in to watch their auditions. And they wanted my opinion on who was talented, because they wanted to get a group of people together who would write movies and TV shows and things and would also act in them. So I showed up, and they had about 20 actors auditioning. And I said to them, what's going on here? I mean, this is Alibaba. You're talking about a life-changing opportunity for actors in China. I mean, truly, Alibaba has limitless money. They work very closely with lots of internet companies. There should be hundreds. There should be so many applicants here that you would need multiple days to interview them. How is it possible you only have 20 people? And the answer was, the 2 people they hired to run this didn't know the first thing about recruiting. And they put an advertisement on the internet. Nobody knew what it was. It wasn't a good advertisement. They put it in the wrong places. Guess what? The whole project failed. And Alibaba ended up not using these people. They didn't use this whole company. They fired them, and they ended up just buying a team a group of people I know who now are sort of Alibaba's team, and they're fine, you know, but Alibaba certainly had the resources to create something amazing. But without the recruitment, without the pool of applicants, there's nothing. So this is a really important technique. Okay, in our actual class, we'll start with our group presentation, which should be about the OOH, and then we'll plan the presentation for the following week. Then we will do our Carter Cleaning Company activity, and then we will get right into this. So as I said, we're now in what I consider to be part 2 of the class. Part 1 was introduction. What is HR? What's the importance of HR? What are some issues affecting HR these days? What are the 8 parts of HR? Then the laws and the regulations and the whole history of that. What is discrimination? What is sexual harassment? How do you prove discrimination? What's the difference between disparate treatment and disparate impact and the 4/5 test? What's the BFOQ defense and the business necessity defense? For sexual harassment, what are the 2 heads of complaint, which are hostile work environment and quid pro quo. Then in the 3rd subject, we talk about the strategy of HR and how there's this 7-step plan, which involves knowing the vision and understanding the internal and external aspects of the company, the SWOT diagram, and how is HR involved in that, in the internal and external. Obviously, internal HR, we know our employees. We know their strengths and weaknesses. Opportunities and threats in HR, we should understand benefits packages in competition, competitor firms. We should understand different kinds of incentives and compensation and what are other people in the market giving to their employees. So we should be able to guide the CEO in understanding that stuff. Then they choose a strategy, they implement it, and then when they evaluate the strategy, HR is big in that because we're using our information systems, our digital dashboard, our balanced scorecard, all of our computer-generated information. So in part 2, we're going to touch on each of these 5 basic elements of HR, starting with the first one, recruitment. So when we talk about recruitment, another way to say this is talent management. Often we use that when we're talking about, talent like actors and singers and dancers and artists, but in HR, we just call people talent. So in talent management, traditionally, you don't need to write this because this is the old way. But the old way of doing traditional talent management is, number 1, you would decide what jobs you need people for. We need, 5 salespeople. We need 3 advertising people. We need 2 marketing people. We need 1 manager. We decide who we need. Then we build a pool of people by recruiting. And that could be internal or external, which we'll talk about. Internal means that we try to get this pool of people from our employees. Now, obviously, that only works in a bigger company. If Apple is looking for a new manager, they don't really need to look outside. They have tens of thousands of employees. They can do an internal search, and HR is a big part of that. Smaller companies certainly might do an external search. Then they would use application forms, have screenings, have a one-on-one interview, look at your resume. Then they would use selection tools, which we'll talk about next week, which are like tests and interviews and background checks and all that stuff. They decide if they want to make an offer to someone. When someone comes in, they then onboard them. They give them an orientation, like a first training. Then they continue to train the employees throughout their time there. And then occasionally, every quarter, every month, every half year, they evaluate the employees. This is the traditional talent management process. Okay, we call this the staff appraise compensate, this sort of 8 model. So you staff, you get the people you need, you appraise them, you decide who's doing a good job, and you compensate them, you give them bonuses. Now, in modern HR, I think the difference is this idea of this being an integrated process. Here's this key word is integrated, which means it's not 8 discrete steps or distinct steps. It's really one sort of homeopathic, I think that's the wrong word. I mean, what's the word? starts with an H. It is holistic, that's the word. One holistic process that we don't really separate. So in modern talent management, homeopathic, that's funny. Okay, so talent management is goal-oriented, right? That's a big difference. In the past, when we talked about the traditional way, you would figure out what jobs you need. Okay, we need 3 salespeople, we need 5 marketing people, but there's no talk of what's the overall goal here. It was just, we need 5 good salespeople. Oh, you're good at selling? Cool. We need 5 good advertising people. Oh, you worked at a good advertising firm? You went to a good college? Cool, you're in. But we didn't actually talk about our goal. Like if our goal is to be very focused on the customer satisfaction and modern ethical concerns. Let's say we're a very ethics-based company and we're really focused on CSR, on corporate social responsibility. And we're focused on environmental issues and Black Lives Matter and gender equality and just a bunch of modern ethical issues. Well, that actually is really going to change what kind of salespeople or certainly advertising people we want. Just because you went to a great school or you used to work, I mean, what if you used to work for RJ Reynolds, which is a very big tobacco company, and then somebody else used to work for Halliburton, which is a very big weapons company, and they were great at marketing those things. Are they the right person? Are they good at marketing? Sure, they're great at it, but are they the right person for the goals that we have in our organization? Maybe not. Somebody who worked for certain kinds of companies, it doesn't make them bad people at all, but it says a little something about the kind of ethical background they had, the kind of environment they're used to, and the kind of projects that they're comfortable with. If you bring them on a team into a small, very CSR-focused company, it might not be a good fit. And now you've just wasted weeks or months of searching for people, conducting interviews, doing surveys, having back and forth discussions about salary. Then they come in, you do this onboarding. You're talking about thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars wasted because you brought someone in who was good at the job, but not right for the goal. And so when we say it's integrated, what we mean is the process isn't just steps of we need to find people, we need to select people, we need to train people. It's more about what is the overall holistic, one big picture, look at the forest, not the trees view of what we want in this company. So the idea is that this ensures that all the people we take are focused on the goals of the company, whether they're profit or CSR or trying to lift people up from, lower economic class to a higher class. And then we're looking at all the functions that are required to manage these people. That it's not just about, okay, you train them, okay, you compensate them. All these functions work together. We're trying to figure out a set of competencies, a group of abilities, and we'll talk about that a lot in today's lesson and in next lesson, this idea of competencies. That's a really key word in HR. So we want the same competencies for all talent management functions. So one competency might be communication. Another word for competency, it's like skill or ability. There are differences. There's a difference between the word skill and ability. There's a difference between the word competency and knowledge. These are different words, and we'll get to that when we talk about a KSAO, knowledge, skill, ability, other, or a KSAP, knowledge, skill, ability, personality, which we talk about a lot in HR. But these competencies are all of the skills, the abilities, the knowledge, all of these things that we need someone to have. Now, if I'm looking for someone to be a good salesperson, of course, they need to have good communication ability. They need to be good at convincing people. They need to be a good speaker. They need to be maybe good at logic. They need to be persuasive. They need to have a good knowledge of the product. So there's certain skills that they need to have. They need to have knowledge of the product. They need to have knowledge of the field. They need to have knowledge of our competitors' products. They also need some actual just abilities. They need to be able to travel to their meetings with customers. We need certain skills, abilities, personalities. And we have to figure out how these are different for a salesperson than they are for an advertising person. Or else we're kind of just making an intuitive guess. That we have an interview with someone, we say, oh, you seem like a really good person, you seem like you're good at advertising. And it's like, no, that's the very traditional way, is just I'm using my gut feeling in HR. The modern way is I have a very clear list of knowledge, skills, abilities, personality traits, all these things. And I'm really trying to determine if you have the competencies that we need for this job. And if you have some of them, but you don't have others, that could be okay, because we can train you up in some things. We can train you to be a better communicator or more persuasive or give you more knowledge about the products. Some things we don't want to train. The idea here is we're being very proactive. We're not just taking someone in and then thinking, oh, wow, okay, we took this person. Now, what are their problems or what's good or bad? It's like, no, before we hire anybody, let's know exactly what we're looking for. It's very important to know what you want. And that's true in pretty much every aspect of life. If you don't know what you want in a job, you don't know what you want in a friend, you don't know what you want in an apartment, you don't know what you want in a partner, you don't know what you want in a hobby, it's very hard to get things that satisfy us. And, part of this is the process of experience, of having a variety of jobs or a variety of apartments or a variety of hobbies, that you realize what works and what doesn't for you. But without writing this stuff down and keeping lists of what works for you, it becomes this process of intuition, which can be dangerous. Obviously, we have to use a lot of information when we're recruiting people. So we're going to use our HRIS, which I said we'll talk about later in the semester. But this is our computer program, our software that we use in HR. There's, like I said, lots and lots of them. And what they do is, for example, in the recruitment process, it's going to help us with applicant tracking. We may have 100 people, 500, 10,000, maybe 10, however many people applied for the job. They each sent us letters, they have resumes, and we can track them. With onboarding, let's say we've decided that, okay, we are having 3 rounds of interviews. So round number 1 is we're going to just do this online, send in your resume, and then send us a letter. Round number 2, we'll start doing interviews. And then in round number 3, we'll do something else, which we'll talk about when we talk about selection. We'll use a test. Let's say we use a vestibule training test. And vestibule training, and I don't expect you to know this now, vestibule training is when you put someone in a real-life simulation. So a common example is you put someone at a desk and they have an inbox, a plastic box with a bunch of documents. They have a computer that has word processing and email, and they give you 1 hour and they say, get through these documents. That's it. They just want to see, what do you do? When you open up the document, do you open a Word file? Do you start typing? Do you take out all the documents and organize them first? Do you decide what emails to send? Do you check your emails first? Just what's your organization style? That's a vestibule training test. Now, maybe before we do that, we have a bunch of information we would like you to know about our company. Now, we don't have the time to have 50 people come in and we give you a little lecture on our company. So instead, we're going to do what's called self-onboarding, which means we expect you to watch some videos and answer some quizzes and do things like that about our company. If you're serious and you want this job, then you'll go on our platform, you'll watch our videos, you'll take our quizzes, you'll learn a little bit about our company, and then when you come for the 3rd interview, we expect that you have this information learned. That's self-onboarding. That's self-orientation. Now, some companies even have something like a virtual second life, so you can walk around their office. IBM allows you to walk around their whole compound and see the building virtually 3D on the computer, so you know where things are. Time off tracking is something we do with HRS. We can see when people took time off, all kinds of records on the employees. Anytime people come to HR with a problem or a concern, we can understand workflow. How long do projects stay with someone? because everything's digital these days. If you get a project, how long are you working on it before you send it off to the next person? We can harvest everybody's electronic signatures. All this information comes to us. And you know, an HRIS page from the beginning, sort of your home page might look like this. So here's Jessica Williams' page. So it says who's out today, who didn't come into work, who said they're not going to be able to come in tomorrow, who's, you know, if you want to request time off, if you want to look people up, if you want to see company benefits, if you want to talk about training, you want to track goals on your projects. You know, there's a very nice looking page where it just tells you all the things. It's a nice starting point to each day. Okay. The next thing we're going to get into is a pretty big subject called job analysis. It's common sense. A lot of this stuff is common sense, but we really need to go into it and sort of dive a little deeper into what this means, because job analysis comes up again and again. It comes up when we talk about training. It comes up when we talk about compensation. It just comes up again and again. So what is job analysis? It is the procedure or the process of finding two things: duties and competencies for each job. So for example, my job is teacher. What are my duties? What are the duties of a teacher? Well, if we wrote it down, you have to prepare PPTs. You have to prepare textbooks and read the textbook and make sure the textbook sort of matches your lesson plan. You have to be knowledgeable enough about the subject to teach. You have to show up on time and don't cancel class or just end the class an hour early. You have to answer students' questions, right? We could list this. These are the duties of a teacher at CIP. What competencies are required? What knowledge or skills or abilities? Well, you have to be knowledgeable about the subject. You have to have the ability to communicate with people. You can't be too shy. You can't speak too quietly. You can't speak in a way where no one understands your accent or the way you're speaking. You need to be friendly enough. You also need to be strict enough. You can't just give every student an A. You need to be a little bit strict if they didn't do the work or they didn't come. Sometimes that's the hardest part of being a teacher. It is awful when somebody is overwhelmed or something and they just couldn't really handle the work and then they fail the class. It's terrible. It's a really horrible feeling. Giving grades, I don't like it at all, but it's part of the competencies and the duties of this kind of job. So in a job analysis, as a teacher, it's not my job to know my duties and competencies. It's just my job to teach, prepare, teach, prepare exams, grade, give feedback. That's my job. It's HR's job to create this sort of job analysis, to discover the job duties and the competencies, which is what kind of people do you want to do this job? And when HR harvests all this information, we use it to create two things that we'll talk about in a minute, which is descriptions and specifications. These are two separate things that we create by generating a job analysis. So these two things are a little bit different. A job description says, what are the duties of the job? That's it. What is required to do this job? So for teacher, it might be communication skills, giving good feedback, not being too strict, knowing the subject, being qualified, having the right degrees. Those are the duties. Specifications is the kind of people, the personality, the characteristics. Now, this could be, we want someone who has a PhD. We want someone who went to graduate school. We want someone who has 5 years of PQE, post-qualification, PEQ? PQE. I think it's PQE. Post-graduation experience. Post-qualification experience. I think it's PQE. Anyway, the idea that you've worked after you graduated from school. It could also be personality traits. We want someone who is conscientious. We want someone who is an extrovert. We want someone who is open to new experiences. We want someone who is a little bit neurotic and not too open. You want someone who's very organized for most classes. I mean, not for everything. But so what kind of duties does this job entail is a job description. What kind of person do we want is a job specification. And we get these things in HR. We get our descriptions and our specifications. We get them from the job analysis. The job analysis comes first from our organizational chart. We need to know who works at this company. We have people who clean the bathrooms, up to salespeople, up to line managers or low-level managers, to middle managers, to senior managers, to vice presidents, to regional vice presidents. We just have all these different levels. We have different departments maybe in a big company: marketing, advertising, HR, R&D, engineering, product design. We could have so many different departments. And we have to have a job analysis of each job. Okay, so looked at another way, the job analysis is what allows us to create the job description, the duties, and the job specification, the kind of people. And once we have all this information, this helps us with recruiting and selecting the right people. It helps us with EEO, equal opportunity compliance, making sure we hired the right people. It helps us with appraising people because we know exactly what we want. It helps us with job evaluation and compensation. It helps us with every aspect of HR to have a very clear list of the duties of this job and the kind of person we want. So in this area of HR, which is really where we begin, look, we cannot do recruiting until we know what we're looking for. So before we talk about let's get a pool of applicants together who want this job, where should we advertise on the internet? How do we write a good advertisement? Before any of that, we have to know what we're looking for. And that's this process of job analysis. From this, we get our KSAOs, our KSAP, our competency model, all of these things that are our tools to know in HR what kind of people we're looking for. In job analysis, the steps pretty much would be first, we're going to figure out what information we need. Okay? We'll collect this information about the job. We'll select what jobs we're focused on. Then we'll do our job analysis. Then we have to verify this information with both workers and supervisors. And then we can develop a job description and a job specification. So we have to decide what kind of information do we want. We want information about a job, right? Not about our company or about the history, about this job. So let's get background information first. What is a marketing person do? Somebody we're going to hire 2 people for marketing and 2 people for advertising. And you're new to my company, you're an HR person, you work in HR, and I say, okay, I want you to hire 2 new advertising people, 2 new marketing people. Well, one of the first questions you should have is, what kind of information do you need? You need to know the goals of this company. What do they want these people to do? Do they want them to work on very pro-gender equality stuff, or do they want them to sell cigarettes to children? What kind of jobs are these? You got to start with that. Some background information. What is an advertiser do? What does a marketing expert do? Then you choose the specific jobs you want. We'll analyze the job, which we'll talk about, and then we verify this information, right? So you're going to get a lot of information about a job when you're in HR, but you have to verify what's true. We do that simply by talking to the workers, asking them, hey, welcome to my office. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I just wanted to talk to you. You work in advertising, and I've created a list of duties in advertising. I'd like you to take a look and tell me if you agree with this. Thanks very much. And then I would also meet with the supervisors and the managers just to make sure my list is correct. We also use this same system when we talk about something called business process re-engineering. And that is, rather than taking a job that we're trying to create a description of or a specification for, we take a process. So rather than looking for a new person in the advertising department, we're trying to streamline our process of creating advertisements. It's really not very different. We want to figure out, what's this process? What is it right now? So we measure the performance, then we identify areas for improvement, then identify areas for improvement, and then we implement a new way of doing the job, and then we assign what were formerly separate tasks to either an individual or a team. The reason I bring this up, I'm not going to test you on this, but for one, it's in the readings, and for two, it shows that this process of collecting information is not just for HR to hire people. In HR, we collect information about people, we collect information about jobs, and we collect information about processes. The process of creating an advertisement, the process of marketing a product, the process of the research and development team coming up with something, giving it to the engineering team to design it, and then giving it to, or the design team, and then giving it to the engineering team to create it. How do these processes work? How long do they take? And can they be streamlined? It's the same idea. Instead of a job analysis, we're doing a process analysis where we're collecting information. But generally, we collect information in the same few ways. And it's very common sense. How do we collect information on a job or on people or on a process? And I will ask you for the test to be able to explain this, methods of collecting information. And this is really all I'm looking for. If I want to know at CIP, what does a teacher do? Or let's say Mei Ling. Mei Ling is HR. She wants to know, what do the teachers do? What should she do to find this out? She should ask us. That's number one. Interview your current employees about the job or about the process. If Mei Ling wants to know, what's the process for teaching a new class that you've never taught before? What do you do first? Do you find a textbook? Do you go on Google? Do you go on YouTube? Do you look at Wikipedia? Do you look at another professor's class from a different school and try to copy it? What do you do to teach a new class that you've never taught before? The first thing to do is interview us. Whether it's about the duties of a teacher or the process of creating a class, we start with interviews. Next is questionnaires, which is, pieces of paper that she would give to all teachers that would just have lots of questions. Maybe the questions are yes or no questions. Maybe the questions are a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is totally disagree, 5 is totally agree. Whatever they are, maybe the questions are an open question where you write a few sentences, whatever they are. Questionnaires are another way to get information about a job, or to talk to a lot. If there are 1,000 employees in your company, you're not going to interview 1,000 people. You might use questionnaires instead. Observations. So Mei Ling could say, okay guys, teachers, I'm going to spend a few afternoons in the office just kind of watching students come in. I want to see the process of how students talk to teachers. Or I want to watch the process of how you guys teach a class. So I'm going to sit in the back of the class. That's observation. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. Participant diaries and logs are also very important. That would be where each teacher, maybe at the end of the day, would log on to the system and maybe for 10 minutes write a little journal. Okay, it's a diary, it's a journal of the things you did today, anything unexpected that happened, anything that was something that happens every day, things that are average, things that are surprising. The benefits of having these sort of diaries or journals, obviously there's a drawback because it takes Mei Ling a long time to read these. Questionnaires, she can just read them quickly. Interviews, they're happening right now. Observations, she can watch. But these diaries, she has to sit down and read pages and pages of information. The big benefit of this, though, is you get a picture of a job over a long period of time. If you interview me today, about what it means to be a teacher, my answer will be different than if you interviewed me 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There were different times in my teaching career that I would have had a different answer. However, and if you give me a questionnaire, I'm just going to answer based on who I am now, what I think now. If you observe my class now, you're not going to know what I was like 5 years ago. However, with a diary or a journal, we also call this a log, with these kind of things, you actually do get this long picture over time of potentially years where you really can look back a year ago and see what was going on with this job or this person or this process way back then and what's going on today and how have things changed. And that's extremely valuable. Asking your employees. Also, there are a lot of benefits just to keeping a journal in terms of psychology. There are a lot of psychological benefits to keeping a journal just every day of what's going on in your life and how you feel and how you're processing things. We actually talk about this in the very first week of management class because Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, talked a lot about, what did he call it? Feedback reappraisal, I believe he called it, which is a fancy name for, hey, keep a journal and write down for every big decision in your life, write down what you're thinking about, what you think will happen, and then what you're going to do. And then keep coming back to that. And maybe in 6 months, write down what did happen. And then over years, you can look back at your decisions and be like, here's what I thought. Here's what did happen. Here's what I thought. Here's what did happen. And just keeping a journal is very important. But in HR, we ask, especially higher level jobs. You know, I'm not going to ask somebody with a very non-exempt job, to use the language of the FLSA. And I hope you know what I mean when I say the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act. To use that language, a non-exempt job such as cleaning the bathroom or serving coffee at the coffee shop. I don't need them to keep a journal. The duties are not going to change. I can give them an interview or questionnaires. That should be enough. However, for a manager or a senior vice president or something like that, a journal can be very helpful. Electronic analysis method just allows us in HR to use computers, we can monitor when people with their key cards, like when people came in or left the building or how long people spent in different places. We can use heat mapping. We can use their cell phones for location determination. There's a lot of avenues of data that we have because once you go to work, you give up certain privacy rights. So going through these again, because I know it seems common sense, but this is a big part of the ability to create a very good analysis of a job, which allows us to go to the next step, which is creating descriptions and specifications, which allows us to go to the next step, which is deciding what are the right selection tools, which allows us to go to the next step. This is a real fundamental, basic part of HR. So interviews are the most common method of finding out a job's responsibilities, right? This is where you sit down with the people who do the job. You ask them, what is your job? What are the duties of your job? What are the activities of your job? This lets workers report activities or behaviors that you wouldn't otherwise know. If you asked, if Mei-Ling just took a guess, what are the duties of teachers? Teach class, prepare class, talk to students, grade exams. That's it. But if she interviewed us, we might say, our number one duty is deciding how we continue to learn about a subject. Because as teachers, nobody's teaching us. So how do I make sure I'm continuing to learn about business law or learning about HR? Where do I get, that's something that Mei-Ling would not even begin to think of. You'd kind of have to be a teacher for a few years where you've taught your subject year after year, and now you've started to realize, okay, I know the basic textbooks. They're all the same. Once, the first time I taught HR, I used one book. The second time I taught HR, I used a different book to see if it's different and integrated them. By the third time or the fourth time I taught this class, I started to realize, okay, now I've looked at 4 or 5 different textbooks. They're all pretty much the same. Now, where does the next level information come from? And that's a whole separate thing that you'd really have to interview a teacher. And that's true of every job, that there's all kinds of behaviors and activities that are not things you would really expect to be part of their duties. Now, a big problem of interviews, and I expect you to know the advantages and disadvantages of all of these for your final exam. Again, this is on the final exam. I expect you to know advantages and disadvantages. So advantages, you find out all of these behaviors and activities that you didn't know about. Disadvantages is a distortion of information, and that includes both exaggeration and minimization. So especially when it's related to payment. So if Mei Ling is giving me an interview and she's asking me about the job, and I know this is related to me getting a salary increase, I might exaggerate how hard it is. Oh my God, being a teacher, you never stop working Monday to Sunday. Students can contact you at any time, and there's always so much to learn. And just exaggerate it because I want, to get more salary. Or you might minimize problems. If she says, do you have a lot of students who have a problem understanding you? Oh, no, I think everybody understands, I asked the class and they all seem to get it. Just minimizing the problems. And because you're talking to someone face to face, they distort what they're saying. Those are some of the problems. Typical types of interview questions, and we'll talk about interviews next in the next PPT, which is about workforce planning. But typical interview questions, here's a list of them. You don't need to know them, but it's good to have this. Next is questionnaires. So questionnaires, as I said, is just a piece of paper. It could be on the internet. It could be written that the employees will fill out, and that will explain their job-related duties. It could be an inventory, which means just a lot of different boxes, like every day and then it says like clean my desk, check my email, talk to customers, work with management, design new procedures, and you just check which ones you do. Could just be an inventory. Or it could be more open-ended, like describe what you do on an average day, and then there's just a box and you have to kind of write or type an essay. So an example of these kind of questionnaires, a PAQ would be these 11 questions, and you have to answer and write which numbers, on a scale of 1 to 5. 1, it does not apply to me. 5, it's very substantial. This is something I do every day. And, it has these examples of things that people might do every day. And you can, look at this on your own. But like I look at quantitative materials. Do you do that every day? I look at visual displays. This is for a science-based job. Dials, gauges, signal lights, radioscopes. So all of this is science-based, but it's the same thing for any type of job. You would write down all of these possible things that each employee might do every day, and then you, on a scale of 1 to 5, would rank each of them. Observations, there's not much to say about this. It's direct. You're directly watching people, and especially when it's a physical job, and teaching is sort of physical. It's not at a desk, you're standing up in front of people. So, it can be very, very useful. In fact, in teaching, they almost always use observation. And then participant diaries, I said journals are so important. I think the benefit of this, and that should be clear, I just said it, what's the benefit of a diary? It's that you get a long-term picture, a very, very complete picture of the job over potentially years. What's the drawback of this? It takes a lot of time. It takes a long time to read the diaries. And finally, electronic analysis is either questionnaires over the intranet, the network that's just inside your business. It could be an HRIS system, just harvesting all this data that we get. Okay. So we've talked about this idea of what is a job analysis. How do we get information about a job? We might do an introduction with the employees, sit down and say, okay, welcome to this meeting. I'm just trying to, this is not an evaluation of you. This is just us trying to understand the job of teacher. So let's have a brief introduction. Let me explain the process. Let's talk about 15 minutes, getting a job summary. You tell me your duties. Then maybe I'll give you a questionnaire, and we'll have this list of tasks, or we'll use software, and we're just gonna talk about what the duties of your job are, the activities, the behaviors, and when we're done, I'm gonna print this out and I'm gonna ask you to sign it, because I need to verify that what you said is your opinion on this job. I need proof that I'm not making this up, that I got this from you, someone who actually does this job. Very important to get signatures on these kind of things. Now that I have this information, okay, and so now Mei Ling has done these processes with all the teachers, and she has all this information about what teachers do. Now, the next thing she's going to do is she's going to write a job description. Okay, a job description is really about the duties of the job. It's a written statement, so it's written, and it tells us pretty much three big things: what, how, and conditions. So what does a teacher do? What does an advertising person do? What does a marketer do? What does a computer programmer do on a daily basis? What do they do? The next question is how. How do they do the job? You know, I teach, I prepare, I grade essays, but how? Do I do it all sitting at work? Do I do it all from 9 to 5? Do I do it all in the morning? Do I do it all on paper, or do I do it on computer? Just how does the job get done? Do I teach online, or do I teach face-to-face? Are there a lot of students in the class? And then that last one is conditions. Are you outside? Are you inside? Are you sitting? Are you comfortable? Do you have to wear a suit and tie? Do you get breaks? Do you have to stand? Do you have to move around? Do you have to speak a lot? Some people can't really just talk for hours and hours. You know, we need all this information about the kind of job this is. So what, how, and conditions. We cannot write a job specification yet. We cannot write the KSAOs or the KSAPs or the type of personality we want. First, we need to know what does an employee who does this job, what do they need to do, how do they need to do it, and what are the conditions? Standing, sitting, walking, talking, nice inside office. Do you work alone? Do you have a lot of people in the office? Is it noisy? Is it quiet? Is it on the 50th floor of a building? Is it on the second floor? Is it easy to get to by transportation? You know, do you have to go between campuses? What are the conditions? The physical conditions. Okay, so this might be a sample of a job description. This would be for telesales, somebody who answers phones, tries to sell things on the phone. So on the top, we have, you know, some information like the salary, the job family, this is sales job, the division, the department, the location, here it's Boston. Who do you report to? Who's your boss? For EEOC, what are you considered? Are you exempt or non-exempt? You're non-exempt for the FLSA. The date the job begins, you know, just basic information. Then you might have a little job summary, scope and impact, just what do you have to do? What are your responsibilities? And then knowledge and experience, your KSAOs. You know, this is a very, very basic sort of job description. They can get much more complex than this. But the kind of things we're looking for in a job description are these, right? So let's go through these one by one, make sure we kind of know what they are. So first is job identification. And that was that part on top. That's what's the title of the job? What's the grade? We'll talk about salary grades later on this semester and divisions and things like that. What department are you in? Sales, marketing, advertising. What department? What's your job title? Next is sort of a paragraph, your summary, just this general paragraph about the major functions and activities of the job. The general, you know, a teacher at CIP will come to work every day they have class, and in their free time they will prepare PPTs and visual presentations based on their own personal knowledge and a textbook. They will present this to the students. They will also create examinations or essays or ways to test the students, and they will grade those and give feedback, just a paragraph. Next is relationships. Relationships can be who supervises you, that is, who do you report to? I report to Yiling, she is my boss. Or who do you supervise? Are you a manager and you supervise people below you? So all of your business relationships, not personal, only business. Next is your responsibilities and duties. That is just this list of tasks, this list of duties, right? Prepare, read textbook, prepare PPT, give feedback to students, meet students for office hours, prepare exams, just a whole list. Next is power or authority. What kind of authority do I have? I have the authority to give you grades, but that's it. I can't fire you, I can't expel you, I can't suspend you, I can't move you out of my class to a new class. I don't have those kind of powers or authority that maybe Yiling or Mei Ling might have. Next is standards of performance. What is the benchmark? So what is a standard? You know, to be a good teacher, you must have a PhD, you must have read at least 2 textbooks in the subject, you must have taught the subject for at least 2 semesters before, you must achieve an 85% student satisfaction rating, just whatever the standards are, the general benchmarks of success, you know, and then we know what you need to achieve to do this job successfully. Must be able to communicate effectively with other teachers, must not get into quarrels with the administration, anything like that. Next is working conditions. And that, as I said, is, and we'll talk about it from ONET, we already talked about it, but things like, are you standing, sitting, is it loud, is it quiet, are you on a high floor, low floor, is it far away, do you have to travel between locations, is it hot, is it cold, are you inside or outside, or, you know, all those kind of things. That's the working conditions. Is the office 100% Chinese people? Is the office 100% women? Is the office, you know, just anything that is part of the condition that it's important that people know that before they get the job. And then the job specifications, which we haven't done yet. That's what we'll do next. Okay, next is an activity, and we will do that together in class. Now let's talk about specifications. So specifications are not a description of a job, they're much more a description of a person. Okay, again, a specification is not a description of a job. It's a description of a person, the kind of person who's right for this job. So we have a job description, that's the job, and a job specification, that's the person. We're going to have different ones for people who are trained versus untrained. We're going to have different specifications based on the kind of judgment that this person needs to have. If you're cleaning the bathrooms, you don't need to have a high level of judgment. If you're a teacher, you do. I'm giving you guys grades. That grade could affect your graduate school applications or all kinds of things, or whether you can go on and take another class, or, you know, whether you can graduate. I need to really have a clear judgment. And it took years and years of working with, for me, it was working with schools in England, where every semester, multiple times, we would have phone calls with England where we would go through grades. We would have to send them papers that I considered to be an A, papers that I considered to be like a D, and papers that I considered to be like a C, sort of like a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 papers. And I would send them to England to see how they graded them blind. So I wouldn't tell them this is the 4.0, this is the 2.0. I graded them on a separate piece of paper. Then I'd send them to England, and then we would talk about, you know, with these people who'd been professors for many, many years, why they agreed or disagreed. And you know, and that's so, you know, you can develop judgment, but you got to understand what are the standards. And even when I got into CIP, one of the first things I had to do was sit down with the other teachers and say, hey guys, what's a 3.0 here? What's a 2.0 here? Because it's different in different places. You know, a good example is Harvard. The average grade in Harvard, the average, is above 95. Now that seems impossible, right? How can everybody get above a 95? And the point is, they don't want to give bad grades. That looks bad for Harvard. So it's very hard to get in. And once you're in, supposedly, I didn't go there, but supposedly it's not that hard. You know, everybody's going to get pretty damn good grades, pretty darn good grades. Excuse me, that might be the first bad word I've said. So the point is, what they consider a 3.0 or a 4.0 might be very different. They might consider something to have a 4.0 that at a lower ranked school would never get a 4.0. It's really different in different places. This is important to know. Job specifications can be based on statistics, the kind of person that we're looking for. We can use all kinds of computer-generated models of who is good for jobs based on, in different industries, who quits, what's the turnover. Because when people come in, these days with HR, we have so much information that when people come into the job, we give them tests. And one of the most common tests is the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Inventory. Typology inventory? I don't know. I think I'll make you take it. Or maybe I did an OB. But either way, the MBTI is the standard personality test. Because of that, because so many jobs ask their employees to keep an MBTI, we have records from around the world of what kind of personalities quit what kind of jobs. So if we ask you to take a test, we have these statistical models that if you rank, you know, you are an ENFJ or an INPT or, you know, whatever you are, in this kind of job, it might not fit you, especially not if you are, and then we have the big five also. And we have all these different models of personality that we use and different tests we use. So we have statistics about who will succeed or fail. We also have the job requirements matrix, which I expect you to know for the test, probably the midterm too. I think this is quite important. So what's a job requirements matrix? When we make a job specification, when we talk about what kind of person we want, we often start here because it's a nice chart that we can see. With the job description, it's okay that we just have a list or, you know, paper. But with a job specification, with talking about a human or a person or characteristics that we want, a personality, it's nicer to have a chart. So we might start with the tasks, and we got this, of course, from our job description. So we might have a whole big list of tasks in this job. A teacher does this, a teacher does this, a teacher does this. What are the dimensions of this task? It's a supervision type task. It's a word processing task. It's a teaching task. It's a communication task. It's a feedback task. What percentage of your time is spent doing this? 20%, 30%, 5%. Now, KSAs, here's where we get into talking about the person. What kind of knowledge, what kind of skills, and what kind of abilities do we need? And how important are they to the task? Well, you need to really understand office policies, that's 4.9. You need to understand typing, that's a 3.1. It's not that important. You know, so for each of these, you need to understand your subject. I need to understand HR. Maybe 1 to 5, that's a 5. I need to be able to communicate well with students. Maybe that's a 4.5. I need to give feedback to students in a timely manner. Maybe that's a 3.8. I need to give a fair test. Maybe that's a 4.8. I need to, you know, what knowledge do I need to have? What skills, what abilities, and how important are they on a 1 to 5 level? So another example, you might have the job description, the characteristics of the job. So what type is it? It's a management, it's a supervision, it's a customer service. What's the role here? What's the actual task? What's the relative importance? You know, how important is this to your job, the importance? And then the time spent. You're going to spend 20% of your time doing this. And then we talk about the specifications, which are the characteristics of the worker. And how important is here they did a 1 to 10 with an E for essential. And that's fine. Now on your tests, I'm going to ask you to be able to construct these. They're not complicated. I mean, I'll give you a job, I'll give you information about a job, and from there you get the job description. And then I want you to describe the KSAOs and KSAPs that are needed for this job. And that is just, I mean, it's just making this chart. It's not particularly challenging. challenging, right? You're just going to have two sides. One side is the job description, and one side is the person description. Another way to say person description, KSAO or KSAP, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other, or personality. For the job description, you're going to write down the tasks and the duties that people have to do. You have to type and transcribe letters. I don't like this line. Go away. You have to type and transcribe letters. You have to prepare graphs. You have to proofread. Obviously, this is some sort of secretarial job. Arrange schedules with an office. Assign tasks. Yeah, so it's some sort of like secretary or executive assistant type job. And so some of these are word processing, some of these are supervision. What's your time spent doing it? Then the KSAOs, you need skill and priorities, the prioritization skill. You need to be able to match people to tasks. You need to understand office policies. You need to understand typing formats. You need to understand graphic software. You need the ability to proofread. And then how important are these? 1 to 5. So this isn't like a complicated thing, but once we have these, we have one for an advertising job, and we have one for a marketing job, and we have one for a salesperson job. These are incredibly valuable. So rather than interviewing people and just making a gut decision, you know, my intuition says you're going to be great here. It's like, no, let's talk about the tasks that this job does, and let's make sure you have the abilities to do these. In addition to creating this, I expect you to be able to create what's called a competency model. And a competency model is kind of a profile for the job. So for each job, we're going to have one square or rectangle, which has the job description and job specification. And we're also going to have one of these triangles. And the triangle is called a competency model. Now, on the bottom, it kind of goes opposite. The bottom is obviously very broad, and then it goes narrow. So very broad at the bottom is just the name of the job. That's it. The human resource manager, that's the name. Now, to do this job, what kind of competencies do you need? Here are like our KSAOs. So you need some personal competencies to do this job, some interpersonal competencies, some HR and management competencies. These are like the abilities that you need. You need to have leadership ability. You need to motivate people. You need to be able to craft strategies. You need to be able to manage tasks effectively. These are all these KSAOs and skills you need. Now we go up and we figure, what are the big areas of knowledge? It's not really narrowing actually, but what are the areas of knowledge? Like management, that's one area. Finance, that's one area. You know, management, finance, employment law, strategic planning. These are these areas that you must know. And then at the top of the competency model, the roles that, you know, are you staff or line authority? If you remember from our first class, we talked about the differences of power and how HR does have a lot of power. Are you line authority or staff authority? Are you strategic in the company? Do you work on strategy? What's your role? So the competency model, it's very similar to a job description because both of them describe what is required. Now the difference is a job description is much more like a summary of the skills required to do the job. Okay, it's just a piece of paper with a list of all the skills and duties required for this job. A competency model is a little different because it talks more about specific behaviors that are needed to be successful. So competency models are actually used in most companies. Most companies, for every job, big companies, always have a job description, a job specification, a job requirements matrix, and a competency model. These four things are considered pretty essential. Okay, there's no perfect list of what exactly goes into a competency model. It's a little bit, it's as much art as it is science, right? So the competencies that are listed for a waiter in terms of their KSAOs, KSAPs, personality, roles, authority, it's obviously very different from an accountant. We have core competencies. Core competencies are probably going to be the same for everybody. So even if you are a waiter in our restaurant or you are an accountant for the restaurant, those are totally different jobs, there's still some basic skills like communication or teamwork or, a basic understanding of the values and the goals of the company. That's core. It doesn't matter what job you have. We expect from the person who cleans the bathroom to the senior vice president, everybody in the whole company has an understanding of teamwork or communication. That's a core competency. Then there's functional competencies. These are different. They're job specific. Obviously, a waiter or a cook needs to have very different functional competencies, what they do in their job, than an accountant would have. And leadership competencies, the ability to be a good leader. Okay, one more thing to talk about, which is let's make sure we understand this idea of KSAO and KSAP. So what do those two things mean? Well, let's start with a question. Do you know how to cut hair? If I said I need a haircut, and I said, hey, do you know how to cut hair? A lot of you would say, no, I don't know how to cut hair, sorry. But do you? This question demonstrates the difference between knowledge and skills and abilities. You know how to cut hair. You have basic knowledge. You take scissors or you take a razor and you just cut it. There's nothing, you know that. Now, you haven't done this in a professional capacity, so you don't have a higher level of knowledge, such as how do you fade or how do you layer or how do you color. Just because someone knows how to do something, it's not the same as having the skills and abilities to do it. So knowledge is just a pure, raw understanding. It is mental. It is theoretical. It is not practical. I could learn how to fly an airplane from reading a book about it. I don't think that means you want me to fly the airplane. You can have a child who learns how to drive a car from watching YouTube videos. I don't think you want that child to drive you in a car, right? Knowledge is just an understanding. Abilities are considered to be natural. Some people have great vision. That's an ability. Some people can draw a perfectly straight line or a circle. That's an ability. Some people are very good at communicating. That can be an ability too. Some people are sort of naturally funny. Some people are naturally shy. Some people are naturally careful. These ideas that we have some things that we're naturally this or that, we consider those to usually be abilities, where skills are things you learn. Okay, a skill is learned. And then we have all these personal characteristics, your personality. You're friendly, you're shy, you're an introvert, you're quiet, you're nervous, you're anxious, you're depressed, you're happy, you're optimistic. These are all these traits and personality things. So with KSAOs and KSAPs, let's look at an example to make sure we understand them. Let's talk about, for the first, a swimmer. So this guy, Fred, he's a swimmer. He has knowledge, but you could learn knowledge from a book. But he knows, how to train, how to swim. He also has this ability, and the ability to swim probably comes from things that are natural, like the shape of his body, his strong arms, his leg muscles. He can hold his breath for a long time. Swimming is the skill. That's a combination of knowledge and ability that you learn over time. And then maybe his personality fits. He's patient, he doesn't give up, he has perseverance, he doesn't get too anxious. Look at Laura. Laura is a baker. So she has a knowledge of ingredients and recipes, but anybody could learn that. She might also have abilities, the ability to be careful, the ability to be very organized, the ability to be patient. The skill is what she learns. She learns how to do this, how to cook, how to bake, how to decorate a cake, whatever it is. And then maybe her personality fits the job. It's warm, it's generous, it's careful, so our knowledge, abilities, skills, and personalities are kind of separate things. We'll do a little exercise in class, and I think that's it. That's all I want to say for today. And okay, so as a basic summary, what we did, I can't go back. As a basic summary, we talked about what is talent management. We talked about job analysis. We talked very importantly about the way you get information about a job, then how you use that information to make a job description, how you add the specification, and now you have your job requirements matrix, and how you take the KSAPs and create the competency triangle model. Okay, that's what I wanted to cover today, and I will see you guys in class.